Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the shop. I hope you guys have been paying attention to the news here lately. Of course, the mainstream news hasn't really been covering this much. Even the back channel news hasn't been covering this a whole lot. But what am I talking about? It's the Alex Jones defamation lawsuit. It has to do with Sandy Hook and everything that went down in Newtown, Connecticut. The shooter was Adam Lanza. You know, if you remember, back in 2012, there was a whole bunch of weird stuff that went on around that whole mass shooting, I guess we'll call it. So fast forward to today, the families of those children, the ones that were killed that day, are suing Alex Jones for defamation. What's really a twist and irony is, meanwhile, in a public way, because there's cameras all over this courtroom, they're defaming Alex Jones. They're not only talking directly about the Sandy Hook stuff, they're trying to say everything else that he's talked about is a wild conspiracy theory, like they mentioned turning the frogs gay and stuff like this, you know. And if you cut through the stuff, if you cut through the BS, there's actually truth to the turning the frogs gay theory. It's not, he wasn't just throwing something out in the wind. It was actually a study they were talking about. Now, that's the way Alex Jones covered it. You know, he said that they're turning the frogs gay when really the frogs are like turning into like hermaphrodites or something like that, right? But still, the message was that the chemicals that they're putting in the water or that are leaching into the water were affecting the aquatic life. And anyhow, that turned out to be true later on. And so somebody needs to eat some humble pie. It's the media, the mainstream media, but they're never going to eat humble pie. What they're trying to do is make Alex Jones eat humble pie for the one time that he was wrong back in 2012. So over 10 years ago, or right around 10 years ago now, Alex Jones was wrong about something that he said, or maybe he covered it a little too, vigorously about the whole deal surrounding Sandy Hook. If you remember, you can rewind back to 2012. And if you're like me, a skeptical-minded person, we saw lots of things that day on December 14th, 2012 at Sandy Hook that didn't make a lot of sense. From the fact that, I remember this one stood out to my mind just big time. This one parent was fixing to go on video, and he was, talking to somebody back behind the scenes, and he was going to talk about how he lost his kid during Sandy Hook, right? And so he comes up to the microphone, and as he's approaching, you can see he's talking to someone off camera, and he's like, yeah, I'll get back with you. And then he's talking to the people, the producers, or whoever's producing, standing in front of the camera, and he's like, what do I do? Just read off the card here? And then he immediately goes into a real somber, serious, oh, my kid died, and he's crying, and it was the weirdest 2-second transformation I've ever seen. And it did look like acting. Whether or not it was acting or not, I don't know. People have different ways of dealing with emotional stress like that. So I don't know. Maybe it was just some weird coping mechanism that guy had, but it seemed very suspicious. And then you look at the videos of the kids coming out of the school, being taken out of the school by police and officials and marched around all the way around the school and brought back into the front door. You don't bring them back in when you're trying to get them out of an active shooter scenario, right? These kids were taken out of the building, circled around, and brought back in. And I mean, there was just a host of things, unanswered questions that, to my knowledge, still to this day have never been answered. The coroner said some things that were conflicting with what the FBI had reported on. There was a guy out in the field that was like wearing camouflage, and they caught the guy, and they were like, hey, what are you doing here? And nothing ever came of that. No one ever got to the bottom of that, to my knowledge, of what that guy was all about. Why was he out there? It made it look like, if nothing else, it made it look suspicious. And people like myself, like Alex Jones, like other people that would, basically be skeptical of anything, any narrative like that, would go out and ask questions. And I think that's what Alex Jones did. Now, the prosecution is saying that he did more than ask questions. He inferred or claimed that they were all crisis actors, all that. I don't have the particulars on that. I watched a couple of the video clips. I didn't see any example that the prosecution presented that made me believe, yes, Alex Jones is guilty of defamation and needs to pay a certain set amount. Of course, that's the rub. Alex Jones's attorneys aren't allowed to argue, or Alex Jones himself aren't allowed to argue that they're not guilty of defamation, because the prosecutors and or the judge pulled a sneaky one on them and basically demanded documents and whatever, text messages, emails, other things that they have during the discovery process, right? There's like a 30-day period. You have to get all this information in. Alex Jones, all of their crew, their lawyers, all of that, their legal team thought they had everything turned in. But apparently it wasn't to the satisfaction of the judge or the prosecutor. And so they basically ruled a default judgment that basically because they didn't produce what they were demanded or required to produce, whether they had it or not, they went into default judgment. So the judge basically made a ruling that you will not have a trial in front of your peers. You will not have normal due process where this will be judged in front of the jury. Instead, the judge made a judgment that, okay, case closed, you're guilty of defamation. So she's already decided that he's guilty. What this trial, this ongoing crap show that we're seeing on the YouTube and stuff, what that is how much money is he going to have to pay? Is it going to be the full 150 million, or are they going to settle on something much less? I don't know. Only time will tell that. But what we're seeing here is just it's a magnifying glass on what is wrong with our system. You shouldn't be allowed to sue someone because they hurt your feelings. I'm sorry. And it sucks that your feelings got hurt. But you shouldn't be allowed to sue someone because they hurt your feelings, especially when they never named you by name. Alex Jones has repeatedly said he had never on any of his shows called out any of these people by name, and they didn't even know their names until like the last couple of 2 or 3 years ago. So, and I believe that. I don't think he was, openly calling out anyone, saying anyone's name. He may have said the name of the guy that I was talking about a moment ago that was laughing and then coming out and then crying, but he only said it in like context of, hey, look, this is weird. Look at this guy. Here's his name. But he wasn't saying like, go after anyone or call to action or anything like that. There was none of that. And yet they're able to use lawfare, legalese and lawfare to attack people and basically break their business. That's what this is all about. They couldn't break Alex Jones with the YouTube, strike when they kicked him off of YouTube, deplatformed him. They couldn't break him then because he went over and he doubled down and he made an even bigger website of his own. And now he gets millions and millions of views on Infowars.com and Band.video. So they couldn't break him. He's still influential. That's a problem with the Mockingbird media. So I believe that's who's behind this deal. I think they put these parents up to this deal to sue Alex Jones for defamation. I don't think these parents came up with this on their own. I think somebody came to them and said, hey, you want to help us make a whole bunch of money and get rid of this guy we don't like? And the parents were like, yeah, how much of that money am I going to get? Yeah, okay. So they saw a paycheck. That's what it looks like to me. This isn't about making Alex Jones apologize. He already did a whole show of an apology video on like Father's Day a couple of years ago. So that's not what this is about. This is about defaming Alex Jones, which is very interesting because this is a defamation case accusing Alex Jones of defaming someone, when in reality, what they've done is they've used the prosecution to defame Alex Jones. And it looks like, I think they're going to turn this into a movie or something. Because what's really interesting is while they are showing video clips, the audio is horrible. But I know the audio in the courtroom isn't that bad, so it makes me think there's going to be like a Alex Jones defamation case, and they'll put out some video or movie about it or something like that. And I think it's not about this defamation case. It's about character assassination of Alex Jones, because they cannot compete with that. So the MSM, as you know, they say when you see Alex Jones veins popping out of his head and he's screaming and he's he's doing his crazy stuff that he does sometimes. Obviously, some of that stuff is to get people pulled in. But I believe that a lot of that stuff is genuine. Alex Jones sees this stuff, the deterioration, the constant attacks on our families, our country, everything, our borders, whether a boy is a boy and a girl is a girl. I mean, every single thing, the words, whether or not definitions are going to remain the same or they're going to be changed and transformed by a Marxist organization called the Biden administration. So That's what this is about. That's what this is about. He is effective. That's why they're attacking him. You know, he's over the target. That's why he's seeing the most flack right now. So guys, look out. If you make YouTube content, if you do anything like that, you need to make sure you're being really careful not to defame anybody or say anything that in the future could be used against you, and they could say, oh, you were trying to defame me and this, that, and the other. Even though you were just, you know, reading a news story, they'll blame you. And that's exactly what has happened here. Alex Jones and InfoWars and Owen Schroyer and the others there were reading news stories, and, you know, they're kind of a, what do they call it? An aggregate, like a news aggregate. They bring a whole bunch of stories together and they read the ones that are, you know, obviously the hottest ones, the spiciest stories of the day. They try to start out with those and, you know, get you sucked in. But I believe there's a passion there inside of Alex Jones and his crew that work there, and it's for liberty and freedom. And most people today aren't used to seeing that, so they just say, that's crazy. When they see somebody getting really animated and, you know, screaming and going, ah, you can't kill me, New World Order, you know, all this other stuff, you know, the answer to 1984, 1776, you know, and screaming and stuff. You know, when they see that, that scares them because they're not used to seeing an alpha male that's passionate, that's willing to use anger when appropriate to convey a message. And that scares them to death. So guys, what this really is, and the reason Alex Jones is yet again the canary in the coal mine, and this case is super important, is that if they can do it to Alex Jones, they can do it to anybody. You know, first they came for Alex Jones. Then they came for Stefan Molyneux, whoever, you know, take your pick. Then they came for Chris Ann Hall. Next thing you know, they came for Hands On Channel. And then they came for you. And no one was around anymore to help you. I mean, that's the point. We've got to stand, you know, as Ben Franklin famously said, we must hang together, or most assuredly, we will all hang separately. He didn't really want everybody to hang. He wanted them to stick together. That was the point. We got to stick together during this stuff, you know, through all this, thick and thin. And so, if you're a fan of Alex Jones, I suggest you go over there. If you want to see them continue on, you should go over there to Alex Jones, InfoWars, you know, buy some of their products, whatever, buy a t-shirt, whatever. I mean, some of the best stuff I've seen in the past 20 years has come out of InfoWars.com, no doubt about it. And the majority of that is right out of Alex Jones's mouth. He is an excellent broadcaster. His style resonates with me. I like his passion. I like it sometimes when, you know, I mean, just think of the memes that have been produced over the years that are, I mean, even if you love Alex Jones, they're hilarious. That Alex Jones indie song. I mean, I listen to that song sometimes just because, not because it's funny, because it's a great song. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And it's true. You know, they are literal vampire goblins coming to get you, man. I mean, they are coming to get you. So Alex Jones has been on the cutting edge, the front, you know, the tip of the spear for at least the last 20 years. I think we owe it to him to support him during these hard times. And yeah, we all make mistakes sometimes. I've said a couple of things, not too many. I ain't gonna tell you which ones, but I've said a couple of things later on and I thought, you know, I didn't say that quite the way I meant it when I was making that video. And it's just the way it is when you get in front of a camera and you turn it on. Sometimes the words don't come out the right way that you've got them here, you know, printed out in your mind. So, guys, let me know what you think about this. Have you been following the Alex Jones defamation trial? Do you think it's as important as I do? I mean, is this the line in the sand that if this case goes towards the prosecution, if the prosecution wins, will this be the line in the sand that's like, you know, hey, we have no more free press anymore. They've crossed that line. I think that's what it is. If they do this, it's diminishing, death by 1,000 cuts, an already weakened institution that is supposed to be one of our main institutions here in the United States that we're severely lacking, and that is the free press. Alex Jones and InfoWars are some of the last remnant that remain of that free press. And many people aren't, you know, they're not used to that. So when they hear that, it scares them and makes them think he's a fanatic and things like that. So I don't know. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. I always love reading them. What do you think? Is he guilty? Should he have to pay $150 million? Or is the prosecution and the judge completely wrong, and this should be a mistrial, and it should just all go away, and the people should just go back and be like, hey, you know what, that was a bad time, I'm glad it's over, but we're moving on. That's what I think should happen. $150 million, man, that's a lot of motivation for somebody to use their hurt feelings as an excuse to silence the opposition. Appreciate you tuning in, guys. I stand for liberty. I hope you do too. See you next time.